Hello everybody, this is CM Kozman again, and today I'm gonna talk to you about cryptozoology, that is the study of hidden animals. Now, first of all, let me define what more or less cryptozoology is. It's the study of animals that are thought to be extinct, unknown, or in some cases somewhat mythical. For example, if somebody is looking for the Bigfoot, he or she would probably call himself or herself a cryptozoologist. In the same way, the search for the Tasmanian tiger could also be called cryptozoology, and so on and so forth. And the point of view I want to bring into this whole issue is prompted by a recent debate between Darren Naish, close friend, hello Darren, and another researcher online. I don't remember his name right now, but I will provide a link to you on the video. There's a discussion about whether or not cryptozoology is a real science, whether it's supposed to be considered a real, actual scientific discipline like biology or botany or whatever. And I just want to say my 2 cents in this debate. And there's several different branches of cryptozoology, and actually this is going to be my 2 cents on the issue. First of all, there's cryptozoology in the sense of studying animals that are unknown. And it might be surprising to you, but unknown animals are discovered almost on a weekly basis. Usually these are little frogs or stuff. And one can argue whether this can be cryptozoology. And most people say no, because the animals that are discovered are not very shocking. They're not interesting enough. Usually they're little frogs, insects, butterflies, a snake, a fish, something like that. But then again, in the past there was a time when you could go out in the field and come back with a discovery of a really fascinating creature. The giant panda was discovered this way. It was considered to be a myth. And also the giant squid was such a creature, and we only got to observe it recently, like these last 5 years or something. So there's real animals that you may consider to be cryptids. But on the other hand, there's another branch of cryptozoology which consists of people constantly looking for one animal. Now, I believe this is where it starts to get a little unscientific, because science works when you're just observing things that are out there, and if you're just looking at all the locations with a certain assumption, then again you may be propagating a belief and not being scientific about it. But then again, contrary to this point, you can go looking for a certain animal and have varying levels of zoological success. For example, let me show you this. Where did I put this? Aha! This is called A Gap in Nature, fantastic illustrated book by Peter Schouten, very talented nature illustrator, somewhat talented dinosaur illustrator, but great artist. And this book is all about animals that recently got extinct in the times of man. Okay, so somebody going out to the field with hopes of looking for the Bigfoot may not be really scientific, but what if that person is going out looking for this? I will show you. Where did it go? Well, you never get the punctuality you want with real books. But anyways, what if somebody is going out to look for this? The Tasmanian wolf, the largest marsupial predator that lived into recent times. Now, if you have directed research like that, if you go looking for the Tasmanian tiger or the wolf, then you may be considered somewhat of a scientist. But by the way, none have been found so far, and it's likely that they're all extinct. And that's the weird part of it. Then again, there's another part of cryptozoology that to me should best be studied under folklore. And this is the search for animals that are not real, that haven't proven to be real, and probably never proven to be real either, because they're just so far out there. Some lake monsters are like this. For example, in Canada, there's a monster called Ogopogo, which is supposed to live in a lake. And people say, oh, it's been around since Indian times, this is a legend, so it must be real. What if it's a legend because it is a legend? I mean, this is the part where cryptozoology becomes difficult to consider a real science. And unfortunately enough, a lot of the nicer books on cryptozoology go into this error. They tackle what are at most myths as creatures that might be plausible. I'll show you one example like this. This is let's say the main tome of cryptozoology. It's by Bernard Heuvelmans, the search on the track of unknown animals. Now I read this book as a young adult and it blew my mind, but it was also a bit like a vaccination against wrong science. Now, the book does cover some plausible-ish creatures like the Yeti or some of the more plausible-looking Bigfoot and stuff like that. And also it's got a really well-written intro chapter. It's called, I'll show you, Cuvier's Rash Dictum. And it basically says there's a lot of large animals out there waiting to be discovered, and it shows mostly 19th century, early 20th century discoveries, and rightfully says, well, these animals were discovered by science and they were cryptids once, and why shouldn't there be other large animals out there? And I think it's a valid point. But then I'll show you what this guy goes and does. Mr. Heuvelmans then starts to tackle some quite unusual subjects. Once again, I cannot find the book page at a punctual point, so you have to bear with me. But it's gonna be fascinating. Just wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it. Oh, okay, this one. Reconstruction of Struthiomimus, the ostrich lizard. And in this book it says it had aquatic habits, which it didn't. This was a bird-like dinosaur. And he has a chapter on Australian bunyips. These are mythical animals in Australia. People think they live in rivers, but nobody seems to agree on what they look like. And Heuvelmans first shows us these really plausible possibilities from the 19th century, the rhinoceros, the gorilla, the panda, and then he goes and says, if these were real, why couldn't bunyip be a dinosaur? He doesn't say this exactly, but he says things to that effect. And this is the sad and disappointing part at which reason seems to take a lapse. There's other section in this book too. Some are plausible, but okay, here. With dinosaurs, Heuvelmans is spectacularly wrong. Here he shows Brontosaurus. And you know, Brontosaurus is supposed to be a long-necked dinosaur, but it certainly as hell didn't look like this European travesty. I mean, this thing, can you take a look at this? It looks more at home in a weird, Germanic folk festivals than in the Mesozoic world, let alone the real world. So, this is where I think Heuvelmans went wrong. Also, certain nuances in the writing of the book, like for example, well, it says in the book that here in this picture it's commented as Dr. Heuvelmans looking into the wilderness of Borneo, more than ever convinced that cryptic animals lurk there. Now, as I told you before, this is going out there with an assumption rather than the open-eyed, let's see what's out there mentality that true science is supposed to be about. Now, this was one book. It gets even weirder and a bit more disappointing. Now, here is another cryptozoological book, once more, another one of my formative books I used to read when I was 13, 14, From Flying Toads to Snakes with Wings, In Search of Mysterious Beasts. And this is written by Dr. Karl Shuker. I think he's a really good author. I may have had some online conversations with him. So, Dr. Shuker, take no offense, but I have a question for you. Were you seriously believing that the things you told in this book were real possibilities when you wrote this book? And once again, this book cranks up the weirdness thing to 11. It considers such spectacular things, like, let me show you. Oh well. It has a chapter on Irish or Scottish myths, and there it has like this one unusual page. Now I will show you. Wait a minute. This is what I wanted to show you. It says, take a look. Did a centaur like this appear in Ireland one evening in 1966? And Dr. Shuker, did you really believe this when you were writing? I mean, some of the creatures here are, okay, more or less plausible, like the Wukwang ox, for example. This was an undiscovered species of antelope. But then, you know, this, I mean, it's a bit sad that both of them are in the same book and both of them are treated with more or less the same level of plausibilityness, let's say. I think this book would have been... Okay, here's another one. I mean, you got antelopes and plausible animals, but it says, was this creature beyond cryptozoology? Of course it was beyond cryptozoology. It's beyond biology, it's beyond... I mean, okay, you shouldn't write things offhand, but what are you expecting? Instead, why couldn't this part of cryptozoology, let alone this book, be about folklore? It could be about folk beliefs and traditions and weird social details in the lives of people that lead them to believe in such things as communities or individuals. I think this is the basement of cryptozoology that you need to tackle with a scientific worldview. But that worldview cannot treat centaurs or man-headed horses or weird things like real animals, but it should just look at them as witness testimonies and consider them within the frameworks of popular culture, of sociology, of tribal myths. And if this book was written in that perspective, it would have been far more cooler to read, in my opinion. I'm not blasting this book, by the way. It's still a formative title and a really great repository of weird animals, but it has the potential of misleading people. And this is why I think certain part of cryptozoology cannot be considered a science, because it lacks one of the key approaches of the scientific worldview. Let me put it to you this way. Science is more or less about Bimbleman mentality. What do I mean when I say Bimbleman? It's like you bimble around, let's look at this, what's that, let's look at that, bimble going around, and then in the end, you collect a lot of data. Okay? And then after that, you start to make links between this data, just like I'm trying to do in an amateur way with my library here. And there you formulate theories. If you just go out on the field, okay? And if you find a new species of frog, that's science. If you find like an unknown species of human like ape, that's also science. That's gonna be zoology. And I think it's wrong to go after certain spectacular animals and call that kind of cryptozoology a science. This is just my opinion on the matter, but I think it's shared by a lot of sensible people out there. This is not to say that the basement of cryptozoology is useless. I mean, these weird flying snakes and shit, I think they deserve a mention. They deserve heaps and heaps of books, articles of their own, but it should be studied like one studies folklore. And these two unlikely bedfellows, you know, this weird animal cryptozoology and basically zoology, just search for normal animals in a normal scientific framework, they shouldn't sleep in the same bed anymore. That's what I think about cryptozoology. Obviously there's a lot to be said about this. There's so many weird different kinds of cryptids out there that one could, and maybe I will go on talking more and more about them. We can make more videos. But if you want an introduction to this subject, here was my 2 cents about this matter. Have a nice day, everybody. Always be on the lookout for new things, but don't go looking out there wanting to believe. Peace out and have a fantastico cryptozoological day, night, or whenever you're watching. Bye.